Tim Brooks. Wanted to welcome you and thank you for joining me on my model shipbuilding log of the Model Shipways Armed Virginia Sloop. Several months ago, I saw in Model Shipbuilding magazine Bob Hunt's Lock Street Shipyard College Model Shipbuilding, and the Armed Virginia Sloop is the freshman course. I built a couple smaller models prior to this, but I really wanted to get into some of the bigger models, and so I decided to try Bob's freshman course and see how it goes. I'm all ready to go. I hope you are. I've got my favorite model shipbuilding sweatshirt on, and let's get started.
Okay, our Armed Virginia Sloop from Model Shipways just arrived today, so we're going to go through the box here, make sure all the parts and pieces are here, everything that's supposed to be in there is, and we're going to go ahead and label some of these pieces so we know which piece specifically goes to what part on the plans. And this is a good time to make sure you read through the instruction booklet completely so you have a good understanding of how to put this together. In doing so, as I read through the instructions, I found that they were actually very, very scant, and there was an expectation of previous experience, and I almost exclusively relied on the practicum from Lock Street Shipyard. At this part of the construction, we're preparing the keel. We've attached the stern post, the false keel, and this is a very critical part of construction. It took about 28 hours, just this portion alone, preparing this keel. As you can see, we've properly measured and marked all of the lines. We've carved in our rivet line, goes right along the bearding line there. That was something that was very confusing when trying to just go by the instructions that came with this alone, but the College of Model Shipbuilding practicum by Lock Street Shipyard was very clear on that. There's a very precise depth that you have to carve into the keel, and that was something that was explained very nicely in there. Also, you can see the bulkheads here. We've measured and marked those and trimmed those so that they fit properly, so they'll fit in at a nice 90-degree angle to the keel once we're ready to apply those. Also, we've beveled the sides of those so they can accept the ship planking properly once it's time to start the planking process. As you can see here, we're using a tool from Model Shipways that allows us to glue on the bulkheads at a very precise 90-degree angle to the keel itself, and that's very, very critical that we get that at a very precise angle at this point. If this portion of the construction process is rushed or not done precisely, then it'll throw off the entire ship once we start the planking process, and at that point it's a little bit too late. So right here we're just applying the bulkheads one at a time, and we let each one dry about 30 minutes and then apply the next. And you can see here this is actually in the process here where all the bulkheads are glued on, the glue is dry, and we're getting ready to start the planking process here very shortly. Another little angle there where you can see the beveling on the sides of the bulkheads, how each one is angled precisely so that it can accept the planking of the ship, which is the next part of the process, and we'll get into that on the next part of the next video. Again, you can see the exact measurements up and down of the keel at a 90-degree angle to those bulkheads. Again, anyone that's interested in getting into ship modeling, I highly recommend Lock Street Shipyard. Their practicums are for this particular one's the beginner model, and it walks you through step by step and makes a process that would otherwise be very difficult very easy, especially for someone like me as a beginner that wants to get into this hobby. It made it very nice and easy. I really encourage anybody to go to lockstreetshipyard.com, check out Bob Hunt's practicums, and see if there's something in there for you. I know for me it's made it much more enjoyable. This is a model that I probably would have put down within the first couple of hours if it wasn't there for me to follow along. So you can see there the little rivet line carved in. Right in there also a little bit of carving along the bearding line. That's going to come in handy a little bit later on once we apply the planking in the next video, where we'll document some of that. See that beveling on the bulkheads there, so that planking rests on those bulkheads nice and easy in a nice line. At this point, we're about 40 hours into construction. Join us in our next edition where we're going to start to put on our planking for this ship, and then it's going to start to look a little bit more like the finished product.